I'm starting here with a handheld overhead shot of the entire island. You can see that it includes several different locations. I conceived of this as being maybe 3 to 5 Lego sets that the company could sell if this were a real set, and that they could break it up and have a small series. So firstly, we have the beach right here. We'll take a closer look, but we can see that the professor would be a part of this model. Next over here we have the lagoon with Marianne. We have the hut area with Ginger, and back here we have Mr. Howell's golf course with Mr. and Mrs. Howell. Making our way over to this side of the area, we see that we have Gilligan fishing, like you can see in the main title. And the last model I want to get an up close and personal look with later on is the Minnow itself, and you can see the skipper with his hat. So let's dig into these elements individually. So as I said, I conceived of this as being a play set with 4 or 5 different actual Lego models that if this were sold by the company, they could actually sell and have a run of 3 or 4, 5 different ones. And so the first one I'm going to start with is the actual hut area, and I'll give you some close-ups in a minute, but let's take a look at the wide angle. We have a palm tree. Now this minifigure of Ginger is made completely out of stock Lego pieces. There's nothing unusual there. The back we have the bunk bed detail, a table, the ship's wheel, and just some various green pieces that sort of give you the impression this is a hut. This particular palm leaf broke. If I get in really close, you can actually see where that palm leaf is actually broken off and damaged. So I used that on the side of the hut here because it would fit nicely and produce something that looked like the hut had been set up with leaves. But there again, it was not an intentional modifying of a piece. Let's take a look at some of the special parts that I used for this set. You can see the cauldron, and that came from the Fright Night series. We've got the stirrer that's actually, I think, a broom, pot, something to drink with. We've got a little water spigot, a fire that's been made. I'll pick this up and hold it close so that you can get a good look. This is the radio that the castaways use to make contact with the outside world. Just a simple 3-piece Lego design, but I think really makes it look pretty effective. And I'm not going to go back and reshoot it when it fell off the table because let's face it, the radio is always disappearing and reappearing on the show anyway. When not in use, I can store the radio under the table like this so it doesn't run away. This Ginger figure is made using some Lego store exclusive parts, but they aren't custom in any way. The dress, I just simply found something down at the Lego store that happened to look enough like her dress. The face comes from some choices they had at the minifigure station at the time, as does the hair. The dress bottom piece, the actual skirt portion, is interesting. For those Lego skirts, they're still using an angled brick that could be used as the side of a building as well, interestingly enough. So that piece did not come from a minifigure. That particular piece that forms the bottom of her dress is just some white bricks that I had laying around. I found one that matched the same type of brick used for skirts in Lego's design logic. One more shot here of Ginger in the hut. So let's dig into these elements individually. Next up is a set that I set up that I would call the Howell's golf course. It's a little bit simpler set, and it's more open outdoors, which is kind of nice. Once again, let's get a closer look at those minifigures. I've used pretty much the same minifigure for Mr. Howell for years and years. Some of my earliest Lego sets in the early 90s had this sunglasses guy, and I mean, really, when you view it from even a slight distance in this particular outfit added to it, it really does look just like Jim Backus. Then Mrs. Howell is another setup of parts I got from the Lego store. Also one of the $100 bills. And more money in the safe. I also took this as an opportunity to set up the bicycle that runs to both draw water and fan people who are rich enough. Simply took the wheel off a regular bike, stuck it in place. We've got a golf club here, and the golf ball is represented by a white button, and of course our flag. Now the pine tree is interesting. If you do look at some of the set dressing on Gilligan's Island, you will see the occasional pine tree, whether it should be there or not. So I went ahead and included some in this set. Let's dig into these elements individually. Next up, we have the lagoon. Here's a shot of it from the side, like you might see if you were approaching the lagoon from the open ocean, which to my knowledge was shown very little if ever on the show. The lagoon has a small waterfall that trickles down to the ocean here, so I used some step pieces to accomplish that. Tree with a vine on it, lots of nice bushes. I have Marianne here with a fishing spear, and I'll get a close-up on that in just a moment. Once again, this was simply a good choice of selection from the Lego store. Her pink top and short shorts are Lego pieces that were available from the Lego store at the time, as is the hair and the face. Just works out nicely to look like the character. Thought I'd give the addition of this angle right here. The show never makes it clear exactly how the sets are contiguous to one another, but there are a number of episodes where they seem to be looking out to either ocean or out to the lagoon from their dining table, so I typically set up the set so that these two sets touch one another like this. On a very similar note, the lagoon set was very expertly designed so that you don't actually see the open ocean from that set. The lagoon kind of wraps around and closes it off. So I've lined up these two sets in such a way as to sort of show how my imagination would have it that characters are coming from the hut area over here. They can look out into the lagoon, but they themselves aren't seeing the open ocean from there. You would have to go around to the side and look out to the open ocean, which we conveniently don't see on the show, hiding the fact that some of it is a set and some of it is footage that was taken on an actual beach. Here's a supporting shot of how that might look from the perspective of someone sitting in the hut area. The hut area would be right here, and then at the lagoon itself you can't see out to the open ocean because the bushes and trees block it, but around the corner you can see the rest of the way out. This is the view that the castaways would be seeing most of the time while they were longing to go back to civilization. In the interest of making the Marianne set a little bit more interesting and a little bit more interactive, I went ahead and created this catamaran to go with it that you could presumably sail around and so forth. It's decorated with stickers that are a Lego design from the early 90s. There was a series dedicated to islanders, kind of Caribbean type of look to things, or Polynesian type of look to things, and so I based this catamaran off of that. The canoe portion is an actual special piece that existed during the Lego sets of the 90s, and then the outrigger is just something that I built. It has all kinds of little grab hooks to attach fishing poles or any other interactive props that you might want the models to carry. And then we just have simply two beams connecting it. I made them sort of mismatched to suggest it was something that the castaways might have tried to put together in order to escape the island. But we all know that probably wouldn't work because Gilligan would probably mess it up. this is an almost perfect segue into the last two sets that I envisioned for the overall model as a whole. That is the beach and the minnow itself. So let's dig into those more closely. Well, most fans may be aware that the minnow does not show up very much in the series as a whole. It appeared in just a few episodes at the beginning of the first season until, spoiler alert, Gilligan attempted to glue it back together, and the result was that it came completely apart. For my playset, it seemed appropriate to have the minnow in one piece as an interactive toy. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the beach first, and then we'll look at the minnow last. I'm going to say that of the several models I have prepared so far for this series, I am very impressed with how well this model films. It looks just absolutely fantastic on this camera. There's some nice shadow content, but there is nothing that's really obscured. Things are not really hidden by any other things. It just looks really fantastic. It's blocky. It has some mid-90s Lego character to it, but it doesn't look unrealistic per se, which is nice. So going through this, you can see the top of this coconut tree is actually topped with two broken palm leaves. They weren't intentional breaks, they just simply broke over the years that I've had this, and I went ahead and left them. As another sort of toast to the early episodes of Gilligan's Island, this model is meant to represent the transmitter, which would have allowed them to contact civilization until, as you might guess, Gilligan destroyed it. Here's the professor sitting by the fire. This fire is seen in the closing credits, and I will show you more about that in a future shot. I have two base plates, a sand and an ocean. There again, you might notice that this sand base plate got a little dirty over the years. I left it alone. I think it makes it look more like real sand. Another nod to an early episode of the series. They couldn't find water. There's an opening cave that allows them to find water, and I created that here. The cave is hinged so that you can open and close it and recreate that adventure. No exploration of the show would be complete without Gilligan fishing. This saw shark is a piece you can still frequently get with Legos. So we have our Gilligan character fishing, and in the saw shark's mouth I put something white that would hold its mouth open and in place so that you could reel it in or whatever. I picked white because I was imagining it was the radio that had gotten swallowed in one of those early episodes. However, the real radio unfortunately won't fit in this shark's mouth. Here's a close-up of what the Gilligan minifigure looks like, and also the fishing pole that he's holding. The hair comes from an Anakin Skywalker kit. The shirt comes from the Lego Racing series. I'm not entirely sure what happened to get these pants dirty, but I thought they looked great for Gilligan being on the beach, so I left them that way. And now in finale, it's time for a look at probably my most prized part of this entire set, which is my model of the minnow itself. As you can see here, this is another great example of a Lego piece or element that was in some way damaged that I went ahead and used. This is an actual floating boat. The lower black portion is something that is actually floatable, and if the model is correctly balanced, this will float in water. It's also happened to be the right shape. Up at the top we have our conning tower and our ship's wheel where the skipper and Gilligan can pilot the ship. As you can see here, the conning tower is a bit forced perspective. It's a little bit lower than it would be for normal minifigure scale, and that's because the main cabin that comes from the flying time vessel is just a little tall compared to what the minnow should be in the picture, so I lowered the conning tower to make up for that. I did include the fact that the canopy sticks out past the back of the main cabin. It probably comes as no surprise that the minnow looked a little different in the season 2 and 3 main titles. So that slightly higher cabin might actually be acceptable on those terms, and that's the reason why I went ahead and went with that kind of scaling. Inside, not a lot of detail here, just some engine access and a deck that elevates the minifigures so they can easily be seen through the windows if you were piloting this vessel across the seas. I'm taking this shot right here so that I can perhaps leave it for some of you fans to compare with the shot from the opening title, just to get an idea of the shape of the boat. I put a ladder right here so that characters could climb on and off the back. The real Minnow had something similar but not identical to this. I was doing this in terms of thinking of things interactively so that kids could play with this set. All in all, though, the Minnow was tremendously fun to build and also to update over the years. I was 8 or 9 when I started working on this, and the version you see now is the one that was completed up through the time that I was in college. And this tiny ship has been a favorite part of the process for me all throughout. I used these Lego mountains and boulders that were a standard piece back in the 90s you could find with castle sets or diving sets or any variety of different sets, just to provide a backdrop for the island and also to be the volcano. They are hollow, although this one has a little bit of detailing on the inside, but I thought I'd just sort of show you this is what they look like. They're one-sided. I've had this model for a long time. At one point I actually had built a full volcano that used many of these pieces and was double-sided and had fire inside of it and so forth. I simplified it down to just these few mountain pieces because I was looking for something that would fit inside the space, and of course I could detail the inside of this volcano if I felt I needed to for any particular type of play that I was doing. Before we close for the day, I want to get a good look of the model from this side view, as it would be if you were coming up to the shore of the island in the same direction that the Minnow did, give you an idea of what that looks like from a ground level view, and we'll swing up and take a look at what that looks like as we sort of fly by the island in its full assembled form. I made the decision not to move the other minifigures, but in this shot here you can see the fire that is built with the transmitter nearby, and Gilligan is fishing over behind the Minnow in a similar shot to what you see in the closing credits. And so, to coin a phrase, that was the tale of our castaways.